The telegram crumpled in Helena Lancaster's gloved hand as she watched the westbound train disappear into the scorching Arizona horizon, taking with it the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry. She stood frozen on the wooden platform of the San Diego station, her traveling dress sticking to her back in the October heat of 1882, while other passengers bustled around her with purpose and destination. The cotton fabric of her collar felt like a noose, constricting her breath as reality settled over her shoulders like a burial shroud. Charles Whitmore, the rancher who had sent her beautiful letters for 6 months, describing sunsets over endless valleys and promising her a life of comfort and companionship, had gotten on that train with another woman on his arm. A blonde woman in expensive silks who laughed too loudly and wore a ring that caught the afternoon light. Helena had recognized him immediately from the photograph he had sent. She had called out his name, her voice hopeful and trembling. He had turned, looked directly at her with those same blue eyes from the picture, and then deliberately looked away. The blonde woman had tugged his arm, whispered something, and they had boarded the train without a backward glance. The conductor had blown the whistle. The train had pulled away. And Helena had stood there, speechless, as her entire future evaporated into steam and smoke. Now the platform was nearly empty. Her 2 worn carpetbags sat at her feet like loyal dogs with nowhere to go. She had $17 to her name, no family, no prospects, and no return ticket to Boston. Even if she could afford passage back, there was nothing waiting for her there except the charity of distant cousins who had made it clear she had overstayed her welcome. The first sob escaped before she could stop it, then another. Soon tears were streaming down her face, and she did not have the strength to care who might see. She sank onto a wooden bench, buried her face in her hands, and let the grief pour out of her. All the hope she had carried across the country, all the dreams she had constructed from carefully worded letters, all the courage it had taken to leave everything familiar behind, it all dissolved into salt water and humiliation. "Miss, are you hurt?" The voice was deep and genuinely concerned. Helena tried to compose herself, wiping hastily at her face with a handkerchief that was already soaked through. She looked up to find a tall man in simple work clothes standing a respectful distance away. He held a clipboard in one hand and had removed his hat with the other, revealing dark hair that fell across his forehead. His face was all strong angles and sun-weathered skin, with eyes the color of whiskey that held unexpected kindness. "I am fine," Helena managed, though her voice betrayed her. "Thank you for your concern." He did not move away. Instead, he glanced at her bags, then at the empty track where the train had vanished, and something like understanding crossed his features. "That would be more convincing if you were not sitting here crying hard enough to flood the rails." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her, though it came out more like a hiccup. "I suppose subtlety was never my strength." "Xander Dalton," he said, taking a step closer and extending his hand. "I work here at the station. Clerk, scheduler, occasional porter, and apparently the welcoming committee for abandoned travelers." She took his hand briefly, noting the calluses and the strength in his grip. "Helena Lancaster, recently arrived mail-order bride. Even more recently abandoned by her intended groom on this very platform." Xander's jaw tightened. "He was here, and he just left you standing." He pretended not to know me and boarded the westbound train with another woman. The words came out flat now, the tears temporarily exhausted. "I watched my entire future leave without me." He was quiet for a moment, and Helena appreciated that he did not rush to fill the silence with empty platitudes. Finally, he settled onto the bench beside her, maintaining a proper distance but offering his presence as comfort. I have worked at this station for 3 years now. I have seen a lot of arrivals and departures, reunions and goodbyes, and I will tell you something I have learned to be true." Helena looked at him, this stranger with kind eyes who had no reason to care about her predicament. "The best connections are never planned," Xander said quietly. "The ones that change your life are the ones you stumble into when everything else has fallen apart. When the path you thought you were supposed to walk disappears, that is when you might find the one you were meant to be on all along." "That is a lovely philosophy," Helena said, her voice cracking. "But right now I am stranded in a city I do not know, with barely enough money for a week of lodging and no prospects whatsoever. Forgiveness me if I struggle to see the silver lining." Xander nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Philosophy does not put a roof over your head or food in your belly. So let us talk practically. Do you have skills? Work experience?" "I can read and write in 3 languages. I can do arithmetic and bookkeeping. I can sew, cook, clean, tend a garden, and I once managed the household accounts for my uncle's shipping business in Boston before he died." Helena squared her shoulders, finding some steel in her spine despite her red eyes and tear-stained face. "I am educated and capable and willing to work. I simply need someone to give me a chance. The boarding house 2 streets over is run by a woman named Mrs. Chen," Xander said, his tone shifting to something businesslike and helpful. "She is fair, charges reasonable rates, and she feeds her boarders well. I can take you there, vouch for you. That will buy you some time to find employment." "I cannot pay much," Helena admitted. "Mrs. Chen has a good heart. We will figure something out." He stood and picked up both her carpetbags as though they weighed nothing. "Come on. The sun will be setting soon, and you should not be wandering around unfamiliar streets in the dark." Helena rose on unsteady legs, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. "Why are you helping me? You do not know anything about me." Xander looked at her with those honest whiskey eyes. "I know you had the courage to travel across a continent for the possibility of something better. I know you are sitting here crying instead of causing a scene or falling apart entirely, which shows strength. And I know that anyone who gets abandoned like that deserves some kindness to balance the scales." He paused. "Besides, I have been where you are. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. Lost and alone in a place that does not feel like home. Someone helped me then. I am just passing it forward." They walked through the streets of San Diego as the October sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city was a strange mixture of old Spanish architecture and new American construction, reflecting its complicated history. Helena tried to absorb details, to orient herself in this unfamiliar landscape. The air smelled of salt from the harbor, horse manure from the busy streets, and something floral she could not identify. Xander kept up a steady stream of information as they walked, pointing out landmarks and establishments. The general store, the post office, the doctor's office, the church, the saloon. His voice was calming, and Helena found herself relaxing slightly despite the disaster of her day. "You are not from here originally," she observed. His accent had traces of something else, though she could not place it. "Tennessee," he confirmed. "Came west 5 years ago looking for something different. Worked on ranches, did some prospecting, tried my hand at various trades. Ended up here about 3 years back when I realized I preferred organizing schedules to breaking my back in the sun. Do you miss it? Tennessee? Sometimes I miss what it was before the war, but that place does not exist anymore, and the people I knew there are mostly dead or scattered." His voice carried old grief, worn smooth by time but still present. "San Diego is home now. It has been good to me." The boarding house was a 2-story structure painted pale yellow with white trim. Flower boxes adorned the windows, bursting with colorful blooms that seemed impossibly vibrant. The front porch was swept clean, and through the windows, Helena could see warm lamplight. A small woman with gray-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes answered Xander's knock. She looked to be in her 50s, wearing a practical dress with an apron tied around her waist. Her face lit up when she saw Xander. "Mr. Dalton, you are late for supper again," she scolded, though her tone was affectionate. Then her gaze shifted to Helena, and her expression shifted to concern. "And you have brought a guest who looks like she has had a very long day, Mrs. Chen. This is Miss Helena Lancaster. She arrived today on the afternoon train from the east, and her circumstances have changed unexpectedly. She needs lodging and is a respectable woman of good character." Mrs. Chen studied Helena with eyes that seemed to see everything. Helena forced herself to stand straight and meet that penetrating gaze, refusing to be cowed by her circumstances. "Come inside, child," Mrs. Chen said finally, stepping back to open the door wider. "Mr. Dalton does not vouch for people lightly. If he says you are respectable, then you are welcome here." The interior of the boarding house was clean and comfortable, if not luxurious. The smell of something savory wafted from what must be the kitchen. Helena felt her stomach growl, reminding her that she had eaten nothing since a stale roll at dawn. "I have one room available," Mrs. Chen said, leading them through a parlor where two older men sat playing chess and a younger woman read by lamplight. "Third floor, small but private with a good window. $2 a week, including breakfast and supper." Helena did quick calculations in her head. At that rate, her money would last perhaps 8 weeks if she spent nothing on anything else. It was not much time, but it was something. "I can pay for 4 weeks in advance," she said, trying to sound confident. "After that, I will need to have found employment." 4 weeks is plenty of time," Mrs. Chen said. "San Diego is growing. There is work for those willing to do it. What are your skills?" Helena repeated the list she had given Xander, and Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "The dress shop on Main Street has been looking for someone with neat handwriting to manage their books and orders. The owner, Miss Thornton, is particular but fair. I will introduce you tomorrow if you like." "I would appreciate that very much," Helena said, feeling the first tiny spark of hope since watching that train disappear. Mrs. Chen showed her to the third-floor room, which was indeed small but spotlessly clean. A narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin and pitcher, a small dresser, and a wooden chair by the window. The window itself looked out over the street, and Helena could see the last rays of sunlight gilding the rooftops. "Supper is in half an hour," Mrs. Chen said. "There is fresh water in the pitcher. Take your time getting settled." She paused at the door. "Whatever happened today, child, it is not the end of your story, just a turn in the path." After she left, Helena sat on the bed and allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day. She had been so certain of how her life would unfold. She would arrive, meet Charles, they would marry within a week, and she would begin her new life as a rancher's wife. It had all been planned and arranged and settled. Instead, she was alone in a strange city, dependent on the kindness of strangers, with an uncertain future stretching before her. The irony was not lost on her. She had crossed a continent to escape dependence on grudging relatives, only to find herself in an even more precarious position. But Mrs. Chen and Xander had been kind. Genuinely kind, without expecting anything in return. That had to count for something. She unpacked her bags, hanging her 2 good dresses in the narrow wardrobe and arranging her few possessions on the dresser. Her mother's Bible, a silver hairbrush that had been a gift from her uncle, a small leather journal where she had recorded her thoughts during the long train journey west. Looking at these meager belongings, the sum total of her material existence, Helena felt tears threaten again. No. She had cried enough for one day. Tomorrow she would be stronger, more practical. Tomorrow she would begin rebuilding. She washed her face in the cool water, pinned her hair into a neat arrangement, and made her way downstairs for supper. The dining room held a long table where 8 people were already seated. Mrs. Chen introduced her quickly, a blur of names Helena knew she would not remember immediately. The 2 chess players from the parlor, the young woman with the book, a middle-aged couple who worked at the harbor, and a grizzled prospector who claimed to be just passing through, but had apparently been staying for 6 months. Xander was there too, seated near the end of the table. He had cleaned up since the station, his hair still damp and combed back, wearing a fresh shirt. He nodded at her with a small smile when she entered, and Helena found herself unreasonably glad for a familiar face. The meal was simple but delicious. Beef stew with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed around her, the other boarders clearly comfortable with each other, but no one pressed her to participate. Helena ate quietly, absorbing the atmosphere, the easy camaraderie of people sharing space and meals. After dinner, Xander approached her as she helped Mrs. Chen clear the table. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Better than this afternoon," Helena admitted. "Mrs. Chen has been wonderfully kind, and the prospect of potential employment helps. Thank you for bringing me here." "It was nothing. It was everything," Helena corrected. "You could have walked past me on that platform. Most people would have." Xander shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. "I meant what I said about the best connections not being planned. I have a feeling things will work out for you, Miss Lancaster." "Helena, please. After you have seen me crying on a train platform, I think we can dispense with excessive formality." "Helena, then, and you should call me Xander." He hesitated, then added, "I work at the station most days, but my hours vary. If you need anything, or if you just want someone to show you around the city, you can leave word there. They will know how to find me." "Thank you, Xander. I may take you up on that." That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a new city, Helena allowed herself to think about the man who had abandoned her. Charles Whitmore had seemed so perfect on paper, his letters so sincere. What had changed? Had he met that blonde woman and simply preferred her? Had Helena not been pretty enough when he saw her in person, not sophisticated enough? The questions circled like vultures, and Helena forced herself to stop. It did not matter. Whatever his reasons, Charles had made his choice, and she would have to live with the consequences. Perhaps, in time, she would even be grateful. If a man could discard her so easily without even the courtesy of an explanation, what kind of husband would he have been? Better to discover his character now than after marriage, when escape would be nearly impossible. Still, it hurt. The rejection, the humiliation, the shattering of her hopes. It hurt like a physical wound, but she was alive and healthy, and she had a roof over her head. Tomorrow she would begin again. She had survived worse than this. She would survive this too. Morning came with unfamiliar sounds. Gulls crying, cartwheels on cobblestones, the distant clang of harbor bells. Helena dressed carefully in her better day dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and pinned her brown hair into a neat bun. Looking in the small mirror above the dresser, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked older, harder, someone who had been tested and found wanting. No, that was not right. She had not been found wanting. Charles Whitmore had been found wanting, lacking the basic decency to honor his commitments. Helena had done nothing wrong except trust the wrong person. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and went down to breakfast. Mrs. Chen served oatmeal with dried fruit and honey, along with fresh coffee that tasted like heaven after weeks of train station swill. The boarding house was quieter in the morning, most of the residents having already left for work or other pursuits. "The dress shop opens at 9, Mrs. Chen said, refilling Helena's coffee cup. "Miss Thornton is usually there by 8:30, preparing for the day. If we arrive around 9:15, she should have time to speak with us." "I appreciate you taking the time to introduce me," Helena said. "I know you must have your own responsibilities." "My responsibility this morning is helping you get settled," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Besides, Miss Thornton and I are old friends. It will be a pleasure to visit her." They walked through morning streets that were much busier than the evening before. Merchants opening shops, workers heading to the docks, women with baskets heading to market. San Diego was a working city, Helena observed, not the rough frontier town she had half expected. There was order here, civilization, though with an undercurrent of wildness that reminded her this was still the West. The dress shop was wedged between a lawyer's office and a bakery. The window display featured a beautiful green silk dress on a dressmaker's form, along with examples of fine embroidery and lace work. Through the glass, Helena could see shelves of fabric bolts and a counter where a tall woman with silver hair was arranging spools of thread. "Mrs. Chen pushed open the door, triggering a small bell. The silver-haired woman looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Chen, what a lovely surprise, and you have brought a friend. Miss Thornton, may I introduce Miss Helena Lancaster? She arrived yesterday from Boston and is looking for employment. She has experience with bookkeeping and accounts, excellent penmanship, and reads and writes in 3 languages." Miss Thornton studied Helena with the same thorough assessment Mrs. Chen had employed the night before. Helena was beginning to realize that Western women did not waste time with excessive pleasantries. They evaluated quickly and made decisions accordingly. "Can you manage customer orders and keep track of inventory?" Miss Thornton asked directly. "Yes, madam. I managed similar responsibilities for my uncle's shipping business." "Can you handle difficult customers with grace?" "I have extensive experience with difficult people, unfortunately." Miss Thornton almost smiled. "The pay is $8 a week, 6 days, 9 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Sundays off. You would handle the books, manage orders, assist with customers when I am occupied with sewing, and keep the shop organized. I require honesty, reliability, and discretion. Can you provide those?" "Yes, madam, absolutely." "Then you are hired. Can you start today?" Helena blinked, surprised by the sudden decision. "Today? Yes, of course." "Good. Mrs. Chen, thank you for bringing her to me. You have excellent instincts about people." Miss Thornton turned back to Helena. "There is an apron behind the counter. The current ledger is a mess because I have been managing it myself, and I am much better with a needle than a pen. If you can make sense of it and bring it up to date, that would be an excellent start." Mrs. Chen departed with a satisfied smile, leaving Helena to navigate her first day of employment. Miss Thornton proved to be demanding but fair, exactly as advertised. She showed Helena the system, or rather the lack of system, for tracking orders and inventory, answered questions patiently, and then left her to sort it out while she worked on a commission for a wealthy client's wedding dress. Helena dove into the work with relief. Here was something she could control, a problem she could solve. The ledger was indeed a mess, with entries out of order, some measurements recorded in one place and some in another. No clear tracking of which orders had been completed and which were still pending. She started fresh pages, reorganized the information, and created a new system that would be easier to maintain. The work absorbed her completely, providing blessed distraction from her thoughts. Customers came and went, and Helena assisted them when Miss Thornton was occupied, finding that her Boston manners and education served her well. She could discuss fabric quality, make suggestions about colors and styles, and write up orders with neat precision. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Helena's hand was cramping from writing, but she had made significant progress. Miss Thornton inspected her work with a critical eye and nodded approval. "This is excellent. Much better than I could have hoped. You have a talent for organization, Miss Lancaster." "Thank you, madam. I find satisfaction in bringing order to chaos. Then we will get along very well. Same time tomorrow." Helena walked back to the boarding house as evening settled over the city, feeling genuinely good for the first time since her arrival. She had employment. She had a skill that was valued. She had taken the disaster of yesterday and turned it into something potentially positive. Supper at the boarding house was chicken and dumplings, and Helena found herself joining the conversation more readily, answering questions about her first day of work. The other boarders were friendly, sharing advice about navigating San Diego and warning her about which streets to avoid after dark. Xander was not there, and Helena felt a small pang of disappointment that surprised her. She barely knew the man, yet she had found herself hoping to see him, to share the news of her employment, to thank him again for his kindness. The following days fell into a rhythm. Wake, breakfast, work at the dress shop, supper at the boarding house, evening reading or conversation in the parlor, sleep. Helena threw herself into her responsibilities, finding comfort in routine and accomplishment. Miss Thornton was pleased with her work and began entrusting her with more complex tasks, including direct communication with fabric suppliers and managing special orders for wealthy clients. The other women who patronized the shop were a fascinating study in contrasts. Ranchers' wives in practical calico, alongside merchants' daughters in fashionable silks, Spanish señoras who had lived in San Diego for generations, and newly arrived American women trying to establish their place in society. Helena learned to navigate these different worlds with diplomacy, and her customer service skills quickly became as valuable as her bookkeeping. She saw Xander occasionally at the boarding house suppers, though their schedules seemed to misalign more often than not. When they did cross paths, he always asked about her work, listened with genuine interest, and shared amusing stories about station life. She learned that he was 26, had fought briefly in the final years of the war despite being barely 15 when he enlisted, and had come west to escape memories of battles and death. "I wanted wide open spaces," he told her one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky. "I wanted to be somewhere the land had not been soaked in blood, somewhere I could breathe without smelling gunpowder. You still have nightmares?" Helena asked quietly. "Sometimes. Less than before. The work at the station helps. There is something reassuring about schedules and timetables, about trains that arrive and depart when they are supposed to. Order and predictability after years of chaos." Helena understood that more than he might realize. "I think that is why I enjoy the bookkeeping so much. Numbers make sense. They add up or they do not. There is clarity in it." "What brought you west?" Xander asked. "I mean, I know about the mail order arrangement, but what made you choose that path?" Helena was quiet for a moment, watching the light fade. "My parents died of influenza when I was 16. I went to live with my father's brother and his wife. They were not unkind, but they made it clear I was a burden, another mouth to feed. I worked for my uncle's business, made myself useful, tried not to be a trouble. But when he died last year, his wife made it very clear she wanted me gone. She had her own children to think about," she said, and could not afford to support a grown woman who should be married and settled. So you saw an advertisement for a Western husband. Several, actually. Charles wrote the best letters. He seemed educated, thoughtful, established. He described a ranch and a comfortable house, talked about wanting an intellectual companion and not just a housekeeper. It seemed perfect. She laughed bitterly. I suppose it was too perfect. I should have been more skeptical. You were hopeful. There is no shame in that. Hopeful and naive. A dangerous combination. Xander shook his head. Hope is never naive. Hope is what keeps us going when everything else says to give up. You took a chance on something better. The fact that it did not work out the way you planned does not make you foolish. It makes you brave. Helena looked at him, this man who had shown her kindness when he had no obligation to do so. In the fading light, his profile was all strong lines and shadows. He was handsome, she realized, though not in the conventional way. His face had character, strength, the kind of features that improved with time rather than fading. You have been very good to me, she said softly. I do not know how to repay that kindness. There is nothing to repay. I told you I am just passing forward what was given to me. He turned to look at her, and in his whiskey-colored eyes, she saw warmth that made her breath catch. Besides, your company is payment enough. It is nice to have someone to talk to who understands. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, and Helena felt something shift inside her chest. Something warm and unexpected and perhaps a little bit frightening. The weeks passed, and Helena found her footing in San Diego. She learned the streets and landmarks, made acquaintances among the shop customers, and built a reputation for excellent work. Miss Thornton increased her wages to $10 a week, acknowledging her value to the business. Helena was able to pay Mrs. Chen on time and even begin saving a small amount for emergencies. She and Xander fell into an easy friendship. They often walked together after supper when his schedule permitted, exploring different parts of the city, talking about everything and nothing. He showed her the harbor at sunset, where the fishing boats returned with their daily catch. He took her to a small Mexican cafe where the food was delicious and cheap. He pointed out the old mission ruins and told her stories about San Diego's complicated history. Helena found herself looking forward to these evenings more than she should. Xander was easy to be with, requiring no pretense or performance. She could be herself, could talk about her fears and hopes without judgment. He made her laugh with his wry observations about station customers and his deadpan delivery of absurd stories. He listened when she needed to vent about difficult clients at the dress shop. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, she began to fall in love with him. It was not like the romantic stories in books, no thunderbolt or instant passion. It was quieter than that, sneaking up on her in small moments. The way he remembered that she liked her coffee with cream and no sugar. How he always offered his arm when they walked on uneven ground. The serious expression he got when he listened to her talk, as though everything she said mattered. The rare, brilliant smile that transformed his usually solemn face. She tried not to let it show. Xander had been nothing but respectful and friendly, never overstepping the bounds of propriety. He had helped her when she was desperate, offered friendship when she was alone. It would be presumptuous to assume he felt anything deeper, to risk ruining what they had by wanting more. But her treacherous heart did not care about logic or propriety. It insisted on racing when he smiled at her, on aching when they had to part ways, on dreaming about what it might be like if he kissed her. November arrived with cooler temperatures and occasional rain. San Diego's version of winter was laughably mild compared to Boston, but the residents treated it as seriously as New Englanders treated blizzards. Miss Thornton did brisk business in warmer fabrics and winter cloaks. Helena had been in San Diego for 6 weeks when everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the shop was busy with customers preparing for Thanksgiving celebrations. Helena was managing 3 orders simultaneously when the door chimed and Charles Whitmore walked in. She froze, her pen hovering over the order form. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall and blond and handsome in an easy, careless way. The woman on his arm was the same one from the train platform, dressed in an expensive burgundy dress with elaborate trim. Charles saw her and had the decency to look uncomfortable. The blonde woman noticed nothing, studying the fabric displays with a critical eye. "Miss Lancaster," Charles said stiffly. "Mr. Whitmore." Helena's voice came out steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "What can I help you with today? My fiancé needs a dress for our wedding." We were told this was the finest shop in San Diego. Fiancé. So he was marrying the blonde woman, the one he had chosen over Helena without explanation or apology. "Miss Thornton does excellent work," Helena said, proud of how professional she sounded. "She is with another client at the moment, but I can take your measurements and discuss options." The blonde woman, who introduced herself as Abigail Montgomery, had very specific ideas about what she wanted. She spoke to Helena as though she were a servant, snapping her fingers for attention and making demands rather than requests. Charles stood by, saying nothing, not even acknowledging the massive elephant in the room. Helena maintained her composure through sheer force of will. She took measurements, made notes, discussed fabrics and trims, and wrote up the order with her usual precision. All while her heart pounded and her stomach churned with a mixture of anger and humiliation. When they finally left, she had to sit down, her legs suddenly unsteady. Miss Thornton emerged from the back room where she had been working on alterations. "Are you all right, my dear? You have gone quite pale." "That was him," Helena said quietly. "The man who abandoned me at the station. He is marrying that woman." Miss Thornton's expression hardened. "Should I cancel the order? I will not do business with someone who treated you so shamefully." "No," Helena said, surprised by her own answer. "No, take the order, do your best work, and charge her double your usual rate for the rush and complexity." Miss Thornton smiled grimly. "I like the way you think, child." That evening, Helena could not face supper at the boarding house. She told Mrs. Chen she had a headache, which was not entirely untrue, and retreated to her room. She sat by the window, watching darkness fall, trying to process the encounter. Seeing Charles again had been jarring, but not in the way she expected. She had braced for heartbreak, for the pain of lost love. Instead, she had felt mostly anger and a strange sense of relief. Looking at him with objective eyes, without the filter of hopeful letters and romantic dreams, she saw a weak man who could not even muster the courage to explain himself. A man who let a woman make a fool of herself rather than face an uncomfortable conversation. She did not love him. She realized she had never loved him. She had loved the idea of him, the possibility he represented, but the actual man, he was a stranger and not a particularly admirable one. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Xander standing in the hallway, holding a plate covered with a napkin. "Mrs. Chen said you were not feeling well. I brought you some supper." Helena felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness. "Thank you. That was thoughtful." He handed her the plate, then hesitated. "Can I come in? Just for a moment. I promise to leave the door open, preserve propriety." She nodded, stepping back to let him enter. He left the door ajar as promised and stood awkwardly in the small space. "What happened?" he asked gently. "You looked fine this morning." He came into the shop, Charles Whitmore, with his fiancée, the woman from the train. They are getting married and she wants Miss Thornton to make her wedding dress. The words tumbled out in a rush. I had to take her measurements and write up her order and act professional while inside I wanted to scream. Xander's expression darkened. Did he say anything to you? Apologize? Explain? Nothing. He acted like abandoning me was a minor social awkwardness, something to be politely ignored rather than addressed. Helena sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. The strange thing is, I realized I do not even care about him anymore. I am angry about how he treated me, about the disrespect and cowardice, but I do not want him back. I do not think I ever really knew him. Xander sat in the wooden chair, careful to maintain appropriate distance. Then he is a damned fool who does not deserve another moment of your thoughts. I wasted so much time on him. All those letters, all those dreams. You did not waste anything. Those dreams brought you here. And if you had not come here, if you had not been abandoned at that station, you would never have met Mrs. Chen or Miss Thornton. You would never have found work you are good at. You would never have. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Never have what? Helena asked softly. Never have become friends with me, he finished, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he had been about to say something else. They looked at each other across the small room, and the air seemed to thicken with unspoken things. Helena felt her pulse quicken. Xander, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you help me that day? The real reason. He was quiet for a long moment. I told you. I have been where you were. But there is more to it than that. I can tell. He stood, paced to the window, looked out at the darkened street. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. When I first came to San Diego, I was broken in ways that were not visible. The war had taken pieces of me I did not know how to get back. I was angry and lost, and I did not care much about living. There was a man at the station, the clerk who trained me, named Henry. He took one look at me and saw past all my pretending. He gave me the job even though I had no experience. He let me sleep in the station stockroom when I had nowhere else to go. He taught me the work and did not ask questions when I woke up shouting from nightmares. Helena listened, barely breathing. Henry died about a year ago. Heart gave out, sudden and fast. Before he died, he made me promise something. He said the world had enough people who walk past suffering without stopping. He made me promise that if I ever saw someone who needed help the way I had needed it, I would not walk past. I would stop and offer what I could. Xander turned from the window to face her. So when I saw you sitting on that platform, crying like your world had ended, I heard Henry's voice in my head telling me to stop, to help. That is why I approached you. And is that the only reason we are friends now? Helena asked, needing to know. Are you being kind to me because you promised a dying man? No. The word came out fierce and certain. That is why I approached you that first day. But I am still here, still seeking out your company, still thinking about you when I should be focused on work, because somewhere along the way you became the best part of my days. I am here because I want to be, because talking to you makes me happier than anything else in my life, because when I imagine my future now, you are in it. Helena's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. Xander. I know this is probably not what you want to hear, he continued, the words spilling out now as though a dam had broken. You came here looking for one man and got your heart broken. You probably need time, need space, need to figure out what you want without some fool cowboy complicating things. And I understand that, I do. I will be patient. I will wait. But I cannot keep pretending I only feel friendship when the truth is I think I started falling in love with you about 5 minutes after you told me your name on that platform. Helena stood, crossed the small distance between them, and did something that would have scandalized her Boston relatives. She reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Xander froze in surprise. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with a passion that made her knees weak. It was nothing like she had imagined kisses would be, nothing like the chaste brushing of lips described in romantic novels. It was heat and need and something that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "I need you to understand something," Helena said, her voice shaking slightly. "I did not come to San Diego looking for love. I came looking for security, for a solution to my problems, for a way to stop being a burden. That is what Charles represented, a practical arrangement. I understand. Let me finish. What I feel for you is nothing like that. It is not practical or sensible or safe. It is terrifying, actually, because I did not plan for it and I cannot control it. But it is real in a way those letters from Charles never were. You have seen me at my worst, when I was crying and desperate and had nothing to offer. And you still think I am someone worth knowing, worth being with. That means more to me than I know how to express." Xander kissed her again, softer this time, tender and sweet. "You have always been worth knowing, from that first moment. The best connections are never planned," Helena quoted back to him, smiling. "You told me that the day we met. I did not realize I was talking about us when I said it." They stood wrapped in each other's arms until propriety and the open door forced them to step apart. Xander's smile was brighter than she had ever seen it, transforming his serious face into something beautiful. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Before Mrs. Chen comes to check on you and finds me in your room, she might be understanding, but there are limits." "Tomorrow is Sunday," Helena said. "My only day off. Would you like to spend it with me? I would like nothing more." After he left, Helena sat on her bed and touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Her life had taken such a strange path to bring her to this moment. If Charles had not abandoned her, if Xander had not stopped to help, if she had not found work and stayed in San Diego, none of this would have happened. Maybe there was truth in what Xander had said about unplanned connections. Maybe the best things in life were the ones you stumbled into when all your careful plans fell apart. Sunday arrived with clear skies and pleasant temperatures. Xander met Helena after breakfast, and they walked to the harbor to watch the ships. They held hands openly now, no longer hiding behind the pretense of mere friendship. Mrs. Chen had noticed, of course, her sharp eyes missing nothing, but she had merely smiled and said she approved of young people who chose partners with good character. "Tell me about Tennessee," Helena said as they walked along the waterfront. "About what it was like before the war." Xander described rolling green hills, forests thick with trees, seasons that changed dramatically, unlike California's subtle shifts. He talked about his family's small farm, his mother's garden, his father's stories. His voice went soft when he mentioned them, and Helena understood they were gone, casualties of the war in one way or another. "You have any family left?" she asked gently. "A sister, last I heard. She married a man from North Carolina and moved there before the war ended. We have exchanged a few letters over the years, but we are not close. The war did that to a lot of families, scattered people to the winds." He squeezed her hand. "What about you? Any family besides the aunt who wanted you gone?" "Distant cousins I have never met. My parents were only children, so there were no aunts or uncles on my mother's side. I am essentially alone in the world." "Not anymore," Xander said firmly. "You have Mrs. Chen and Miss Thornton and the other boarders, and you have me. If you will have me, that is." Helena stopped walking and turned to face him. "Xander Dalton, are you asking me to court you formally?" "I am asking for the chance to spend my life making you happy if you will let me." He looked suddenly nervous. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks. I know this probably seems too fast, but I am 26 years old and I have seen enough of life to know when something is right. This is right. You are right. I do not need months or years to be certain of that." "I feel the same way," Helena admitted. "It terrifies me how certain I am when it makes no logical sense. But here is what I know. I know you are kind and honest and good. I know I feel safer and happier with you than I ever have with anyone. I know that when I think about my future, I cannot imagine it without you in it. If that is love, then I love you." "It is love," Xander confirmed. "And I love you, Helena Lancaster. I love your strength and your intelligence and the way you refuse to let getting abandoned destroy you. I love your laugh and your stubbornness, and how you organize Miss Thornton's ledgers like they are works of art. I love everything about you." They kissed there on the waterfront, in full view of Sunday strollers and fishermen and anyone who cared to look. Helena did not care who saw them. She was done hiding, done being cautious, done protecting herself from potential hurt. Xander was worth the risk. This feeling was worth the risk. Over the following weeks, they became an established couple in the small community that revolved around the boarding house. Xander would wait for Helena after work, walking her home and staying for supper. On Sundays, they explored San Diego together, finding quiet places to talk and dream and plan. Miss Thornton watched their courtship with approval and quietly increased Helena's responsibilities and wages again. "A young woman preparing for marriage needs to save her money," she said practically. "And you have more than earned the raise." Mrs. Chen beamed at them like a proud mother and made sure they always sat together at meals. The other boarders teased them gently, but it was good-natured and kind. The wedding dress for Abigail Montgomery was completed in late November, an elaborate creation of silk and lace that demonstrated Miss Thornton's considerable skill. When Abigail came to collect it, Helena handed over the box and accepted payment with perfect professionalism. Charles was not with her, and Helena felt only relief at his absence. After Abigail left, Miss Thornton counted the money and handed Helena a small envelope. "Your commission for managing that difficult client. Use it for something that makes you happy." Inside was $5, a generous amount for a single sale. Helena tucked it away carefully, adding it to the small stash she was accumulating for the future. December arrived, bringing talk of Christmas celebrations and the new year. One evening after supper, Xander asked Helena to take a walk with him despite the cool temperature. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. They walked to a small plaza near the old mission, where a fountain burbled quietly in the darkness. Xander took both her hands in his. "I have been thinking about the future," he said, "about what I want and what is possible and how to make things work." "That sounds very serious," Helena said, her heart beginning to race. "It is serious, the most serious thing I have ever done." He took a deep breath. "I make decent money at the station, and I have been saving for a long time. I have enough to put a down payment on a small house, something modest but respectable. It would take me another year or two to save enough to furnish it properly and make it a real home, but I could do it eventually." Helena waited, sensing there was more. "But I do not want to wait a year or two. I do not want to spend that time courting you properly and following all the rules about appropriate waiting periods. I want to marry you, Helena. I want to marry you as soon as possible and start our life together. I am willing to wait if that is what you need, but I am also willing to be bold if you are." "Are you proposing to me?" Helena asked, her voice trembling. "I do not have a ring yet. I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I spent money on something you might not want." He looked endearingly uncertain. "But yes, I am proposing. I am asking you to marry me, to take a chance on a life together, to be my partner and my wife. Will you?" Helena thought about the girl who had arrived in San Diego 3 months ago, crying on a train platform because her careful plans had fallen apart. That girl had been looking for security and stability, for a solution to her problems. She would have wanted assurances and guarantees, proof that this marriage would work out better than the last attempt. But Helena was not that girl anymore. She had learned that the best things in life were not the carefully planned ones. They were the unexpected gifts, the unplanned connections, the moments of courage when you stepped forward into uncertainty because something felt right. "Yes," she said, her smile so wide it hurt. "Yes, I will marry you. I do not need a ring or a big house or any waiting period. I just need you." Xander lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "How soon is as soon as possible?" he asked. "I believe there is a 3-day waiting period for the marriage license. After that, whenever we can arrange it." "New Year's Day," Xander said immediately. "We can start the new year as husband and wife. Start 1883 with a fresh beginning. That gives us less than 3 weeks to plan. Do we need more? We can get married at the courthouse with Mrs. Chen and Miss Thornton as witnesses, have a simple meal after to celebrate. That is all I need." Helena thought about the elaborate wedding she had vaguely imagined back in Boston, the white dress and church ceremony and reception. None of that mattered anymore. What mattered was the man standing in front of her, looking at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. New Year's Day sounds perfect. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Xander filed for the marriage license and found a judge willing to perform the ceremony. Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting a celebration dinner at the boarding house. Miss Thornton gave Helena time off to prepare and presented her with a beautiful dress in deep rose silk, a gift that made Helena cry with gratitude. Helena wrote to Xander's sister in North Carolina, informing her of the upcoming marriage. The response came surprisingly quickly, a warm letter congratulating them both and expressing regret that the distance prevented attendance. She enclosed a family Bible that had belonged to their mother, saying Xander should have it for his new family. When Xander received the Bible, he held it carefully, running his fingers over the worn leather cover. "I thought this was lost in the war," he said quietly. "My sister must have taken it when she left. I cannot believe she kept it safe all these years." "She loves you," Helena said simply. Even across the distance. Christmas came, and Xander gave Helena a simple gold ring set with a small ruby. "I know it is not much," he said, "but the clerk at the jeweler's said the ruby represents love and passion. That seemed appropriate." "It is perfect," Helena said, slipping it onto her finger where it caught the lamplight. "I will treasure it always." Her gift to him was a watch chain she had saved for, carefully selected to replace the frayed leather cord he used. Practical but meaningful, something he could carry every day. New Year's Eve was quiet, both of them choosing to stay in rather than join the celebrations in town. They sat in the boarding house parlor, talking quietly while the other residents gradually headed to bed. "Are you nervous?" Helena asked as midnight approached. "Not even a little bit," Xander said honestly. "I have never been more certain of anything. You are my future, Helena. Tomorrow just makes it official." She leaned against his shoulder, feeling his warmth, his solidity, his absolute certainty. "I love you," she said softly. "I do not think I ever truly understood that phrase until I met you. I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They welcomed 1883 with a quiet kiss, alone in the parlor while fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance. The morning of January 1st dawned clear and beautiful. Helena dressed carefully in the rose silk gown, her hands shaking slightly as she pinned her hair. Mrs. Chen came to help, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You look beautiful, child. Xander is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Helena said. "He saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved each other," Mrs. Chen corrected. "That is how the best marriages work." The courthouse ceremony was simple and brief. Judge Morrison performed the service with friendly efficiency, the words of the marriage contract carrying more weight than any elaborate church ritual could have. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed Helena with such tenderness that Miss Thornton had to dab at her eyes with a handkerchief. They signed the marriage certificate with Helena's hand trembling slightly as she wrote her new name for the first time. Helena Dalton. It looked right, felt right, like a piece of herself she had been missing had finally clicked into place. The celebration dinner at the boarding house was joyful and loud, with all the residents toasting the new couple and offering advice and jokes. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, and there was even a small cake decorated with sugar flowers. As evening fell, Xander and Helena retreated to what was now their shared room. Xander had moved his few possessions from the boarding house storage room where he had been keeping them, and had obtained Mrs. Chen's permission to combine their spaces. It was still small, still simple, but it was theirs. "Hello, wife," Xander said, pulling her close. "Hello, husband," Helena replied, smiling against his chest. They made love for the first time with the door locked and the lamp turned low, discovering each other with tenderness and passion. Afterward, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Helena felt a peace she had never known before. This was where she belonged. This was home. "You ever think about what would have happened if Charles had not abandoned you?" Xander asked quietly, stroking her hair. "Sometimes," Helena admitted. "I think I would have married him and been moderately content but never truly happy. I would not have known what I was missing because I had never experienced anything better. I would have managed his house and borne his children and thought that was what marriage was supposed to be. And now I know what marriage can be when it is built on love and friendship and genuine partnership. I know what it feels like to be seen and valued for who I actually am, not just what I can provide. You have given me that, Xander. You have given me everything." "You have given me a reason to be happy again," Xander said. "Before you, I was just existing, going through motions. You made me want to live again, to plan for a future, to believe in good things. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already deserve me. We deserve each other." The winter months passed in quiet contentment. Helena continued working at the dress shop, though Miss Thornton made it clear she could leave at any time if she chose. But Helena enjoyed the work and the income, and Xander supported whatever decision she made about employment. They saved their combined wages diligently, planning for the house Xander had mentioned. Every Sunday they would walk through different neighborhoods, imagining where they might want to live, what kind of home they wanted to build together. In March, Helena realized she was pregnant. The signs were unmistakable and the timing made sense. She told Xander that evening, watching nervously for his reaction. He went very still, his eyes widening. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Yes. Sometime in late October or early November, the doctor thinks." Xander pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she squeaked in protest. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy about it?" Helena asked. "I know we did not plan this so soon." "The best connections are never planned," Xander quoted back to her, grinning. "I am terrified and thrilled and so damned happy I can barely think straight. A baby. Our baby." They shared the news with Mrs. Chen and Miss Thornton, both of whom reacted with enthusiastic joy. Miss Thornton immediately began planning what Helena would need. offering to sew baby clothes and blankets. Mrs. Chen started feeding Helena extra portions at meals, insisting she needed to eat for two. As spring turned to summer, Helena reluctantly stopped working at the dress shop, her growing belly making it difficult to move around the shop comfortably. Miss Thornton threw her a farewell celebration and promised her job would be waiting whenever she wanted to return. Xander had been promoted at the station, now managing schedules and supervising other clerks, which came with increased pay. Combined with their savings, they had enough for a down payment on a small house on the edge of town. It needed work, with peeling paint and a leaky roof, but it had good bones and a yard where children could play. They spent the summer fixing it up, with help from friends at the boarding house and the station. By August, it was livable, and they moved in with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. Mrs. Chen cried when they left, though she insisted they were only moving a few streets away and would visit often. Their first night in their own home, they lay in their own bed in their own bedroom and talked about the future. "What should we name the baby?" Helena asked, her hand resting on her rounded belly where their child kicked and squirmed. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him Henry after the man who helped me when I first came here," Xander said, "but only if you approve." "I think that is perfect. What about if it is a girl?" "You should choose. You are the one doing all the hard work of growing her." Helena thought for a moment. "Rose, after the color of my wedding dress, and because roses are beautiful but strong. They have thorns to protect themselves. Rose Dalton. That is beautiful." In late October, Helena went into labor 3 weeks earlier than expected. Xander ran for the doctor and Mrs. Chen, both of whom arrived quickly and took charge of the situation. After 12 hours of difficult labor, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly. "Henry Dalton," Xander said, holding his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "Welcome to the world, little man. We have been waiting for you." Helena watched her husband cradle their newborn with such tenderness and awe, and felt her heart expand with more love than she knew was possible. This life, this family, this love, none of it had been planned. It had all come from a moment of disaster, from missed connections and broken dreams. But looking at her husband and her son, Helena could not imagine wanting anything different. Charles Whitmore's abandonment had seemed like the worst thing that could happen. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything good in her life. The months after Henry's birth were exhausting and wonderful. Xander was a devoted father, waking for midnight feedings and changing diapers without complaint. He would hold Henry for hours, talking to him about everything and nothing, promising him a good life and a father who would always be there. Helena recovered slowly but surely, finding joy in the small moments. Henry's first smile, the way he grasped her finger, the peaceful weight of him sleeping on her chest. She had never imagined loving someone so completely and immediately. When Henry was 6 months old, Xander came home from work with an announcement. "The station manager is retiring, and they have offered me the position. It is more money and more responsibility, but it would mean longer hours." "Can we manage it?" Helena asked, always practical. "With the increase in pay, we could afford to hire someone to help you with Henry during the day. Maybe one of the younger girls from the boarding house who needs work. And we could start saving seriously for Henry's future, maybe even think about buying this house outright instead of renting. Then you should take it. You have worked hard for this opportunity." Xander did take the position and proved excellent at it. His natural ability with organization and his genuine care for both employees and customers made him popular and effective. The station ran more smoothly under his management, and his reputation grew. Helena hired a sweet 16-year-old girl named Mary to help with Henry and the housework. This freed her to occasionally help Miss Thornton with bookkeeping during busy seasons, keeping her skills sharp and providing extra income. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work and home, family and friends, the slow accumulation of small happiness that built into something substantial and real. When Henry was 2 years old, Helena became pregnant again. This time they were prepared, excited, and less terrified. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in August of 1885 they welcomed a daughter. They named her Rose as planned, though she quickly became Rosie to everyone who knew her. She had Helena's brown hair and Xander's whiskey-colored eyes, and she owned her father's heart from the moment she drew breath. 2 children, Xander said, holding Rosie while Henry toddled around the bedroom. We have 2 perfect children and each other. I am the richest man in California. We live in a small house and budget carefully every month, Helena teased. Rich is not about money. Rich is having everything that matters, and I have everything that matters. Helena could not argue with that logic. The years passed with the particular speed that comes with children and busy lives. Henry started school and proved to be a bright, curious student. Rosie grew into a spirited little girl who kept them constantly entertained. Xander continued to advance in his career, eventually becoming regional supervisor for several stations. Helena returned to part-time work with Miss Thornton, finding satisfaction in using her mind beyond the domestic sphere. They bought their house outright in 1887, a proud moment marked with a small celebration. They painted it themselves, added a second bedroom for the children, and planted a garden in the backyard where Rosie could play and Henry could help grow vegetables. San Diego grew around them, transforming from a rough frontier town into a proper city. More businesses, more people, more civilization encroaching on the wild edges. But their neighborhood retained a comfortable, friendly feel, with neighbors who looked out for each other and children who played together in the streets. One evening in the spring of 1890, 8 years after their marriage, Helena and Xander sat on their front porch watching Henry and Rosie chase fireflies in the yard. Henry was now 7, Rosie 5, both healthy and happy and loved. "You ever think about that day at the station?" Xander asked. "When we first met, often," Helena admitted. "I was so certain my life was over, I could not imagine how I would survive the disappointment and humiliation." "I am grateful for that disappointment," Xander said. "Is that terrible to admit?" "I am grateful that Charles Whitmore was exactly the kind of man who would abandon you, because if he had been decent, you would have married him. You would be living on some ranch somewhere, and I would still be alone, going through the motions of life without ever really living." "It is not terrible. I feel the same way." Helena reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I thought I wanted security and stability and a practical arrangement. What I got was so much better. I got love and partnership and a life I could never have imagined for myself." "The best connections are never planned," Xander said, smiling at her in the growing darkness. "No," Helena agreed. "They are not planned. They are found in moments of desperation by kind men who choose to stop and help instead of walking past. They are built on friendship and trust, and the courage to take chances on something that feels right even when it makes no logical sense. I love you, Helena Dalton, more today than the day I married you, and I will love you even more tomorrow. I love you too, always." They sat together as the stars emerged, and their children's laughter filled the air. 2 people who had found each other in the worst possible moment and built the best possible life. The mail-order bride who missed her connection and the cowboy clerk who had stopped to help had become something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. A family. A home. A love story written not with careful planning, but with courage and kindness, and the willingness to believe in possibilities when everything seemed impossible. In 1892, Helena discovered she was pregnant again at age 32. It was unexpected, as they had assumed their family was complete, but welcomed with joy. In February of 1893, they had another son, whom they named James after Xander's father. The house felt full then, bustling with 3 children of varying ages and needs. Henry at 10 was becoming independent, already talking about what he wanted to do when he grew up. Rosie at 7 was all energy and imagination, constantly inventing games and stories. And baby James was a content, easy child who seemed happy just to be held and fed. Xander's career continued to flourish. His reputation for competence and integrity led to offers from larger railroad companies, but he chose to stay in San Diego, unwilling to uproot the family and the life they had built. He was offered a position on the city council in 1895, which he accepted after long discussions with Helena about the time commitment and impact on the family. Helena continued her part-time work with Miss Thornton, who was now in her 70s, but still sharp and exacting. When Miss Thornton's arthritis made sewing difficult, Helena took on more of the business management, essentially running the shop while Miss Thornton provided guidance and maintained ownership. In 1897, Miss Thornton called Helena into her office and made a surprising announcement. "I am retiring," she said without preamble. "My hands cannot do the fine work anymore, and I am tired. I want to spend my remaining years resting, not struggling with needle and thread." "That is understandable," Helena said, trying to hide her disappointment at losing the work she enjoyed. "I am not closing the shop," Miss Thornton continued. "I am selling it. To you if you want it." Helena stared. "Selling it to me? You have essentially been running it for the past several years anyway. You know the customers, the suppliers, the business. You could hire seamstresses to do the actual sewing while you manage everything else. I will give you a fair price, with payment terms that will not strain your family finances." Helena's mind raced with possibilities. Owning her own business, having true independence and authority, building something substantial. "I need to discuss it with Xander, of course, but I hope you will seriously consider it. You have a talent for this, Helena. It would be a shame to waste it." That evening, Helena presented the opportunity to Xander, nervous about his reaction. Some men would not like their wives owning businesses, would see it as a threat to their authority or masculinity. Xander listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions about the finances and logistics, and then smiled. "You should do it. This is an incredible opportunity and you would be excellent at it. We can make the finances work. Mary can increase her hours to help with James. You should absolutely do this. You do not mind, me being a business owner, mind, I am proud. You came to this city with nothing but courage and determination. Now you are going to own a successful shop. That is remarkable, Helena. Of course you should do it." Helena purchased the dress shop in the summer of 1897, marking 15 years since she had first arrived in San Diego crying on a train platform. The symmetry was not lost on her. She renamed it Lancaster and Thornton Fine Dress and Tailoring, honoring both her maiden name and the woman who had given her a chance. She hired 2 skilled seamstresses and an apprentice, maintaining the shop's reputation for quality while expanding the customer base. The business thrived under her ownership. Helena discovered she had a talent not just for organization, but for understanding what women wanted, for balancing fashion with practicality, for creating beautiful garments that real women could actually wear and afford. The children grew and changed. Henry graduated from school and surprised them by wanting to study engineering, fascinated by the railroads his father managed. They found the money to send him to a technical school in Los Angeles, proud of his ambition and intelligence. Rosie became interested in the dress shop, spending time there after school and learning the business. She had an eye for color and design that suggested she might follow in her mother's footsteps. James was still young, only 6, but showed signs of inheriting his father's organizational mind and his mother's determination. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Xander and Helena celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. They had dinner at a nice restaurant, a rare evening alone without children, and talked about the life they had built. 18 years, Xander said, raising his glass. You have made every single one of them worth living. We have built a good life, Helena agreed. Not the one I planned, but so much better than anything I could have imagined. Do you ever wonder about Charles Whitmore? What happened to him? I heard he and that blonde woman divorced after 5 years. Apparently, she spent all his money and ran off with a younger man. He sold his ranch and moved back east somewhere. Helena shrugged. I felt sorry for him when I heard, but mostly I just felt grateful. He did me the biggest favor of my life by abandoning me. To missed connections, Xander toasted. May they always lead to something better. To unplanned connections, Helena countered. To kind clerks who stop to help crying women. To men who see possibility when everyone else sees disaster. They clinked glasses and drank. 2 people who had found each other in the chaos and built something beautiful from the wreckage of broken plans. The years continued their steady march. Henry thrived in his studies and got a job with the railroad, making both his parents proud. Rosie did indeed join the dress shop business, bringing fresh ideas and modern sensibilities that helped it continue to grow. James showed interest in politics and law, influenced by his father's council work. Xander and Helena aged gracefully together, their hair going gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and occasional worry. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, settling into something comfortable and enduring and absolutely essential. In 1910, on their 28th anniversary, they made a pilgrimage to the train station where they had first met. It had been renovated and expanded over the years, modernized with electric lights and new platforms, but the basic structure remained. That was the bench, Helena said, pointing. Where I was sitting when you approached me. The worst day of your life, Xander said. The best day of my life, Helena corrected. I just did not know it yet. They stood together on the platform, remembering. Helena could still feel the echo of that younger woman's desperation, her absolute certainty that everything was ruined. She wanted to reach back through time and tell her that girl to have hope, that everything would work out better than she could imagine. But that younger Helena would not have believed it. She had to live through it, had to take the chances and make the choices that led to this moment. Thank you, Helena said quietly. For what? For stopping. For caring. For seeing me when I was at my lowest and deciding I was worth helping. Thank you for letting me help, Xander replied. For taking a chance on an unplanned connection. For building this life with me. They kissed there on the platform, 2 people in their late 40s with grown children and established lives, still completely in love with each other. A young woman hurried past them, clearly agitated, checking a piece of paper and scanning the arriving passengers. She had the look of someone whose carefully made plans were falling apart. Xander and Helena looked at each other and smiled. "Excuse me, miss," Xander called out. "Can we help you with something? You look a bit lost." The young woman turned, her eyes red-rimmed as though she had been crying. "I was supposed to meet someone, but I think they might have been on the train that just left. I might have missed them." "Well," Helena said kindly. "The best connections are never planned anyway. Why do not you tell us what you need, and we will see if we can help?" As they listened to the young woman's story and began offering assistance, Helena felt the circle completing itself. They were passing forward the kindness that had been shown to them, helping someone else find their way through disaster to possibility. That was how love worked, she thought. Not just romantic love between two people, but the bigger kind of love that connected humans to each other. The love that made you stop and help a stranger. The love that turned missed connections into new beginnings. The love that built families and communities and lives worth living. She took Xander's hand and squeezed it gently, and he squeezed back, understanding without words what she was thinking. They had stumbled into each other in chaos and built a lifetime of love from that moment. And now, 28 years later, they were still doing what they had always done best, finding hope in disaster, seeing possibility in loss, and believing that the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. Their story was not finished yet. They still had years ahead, grandchildren to spoil, businesses to run, a life to continue building together. But standing on that platform where it all began, Helena felt the rightness of their journey, the perfect imperfection of how they had found each other. The mail-order bride who missed her connection and the cowboy clerk who stopped to help had become partners, lovers, spouses, parents, business owners, pillars of their community. They had become everything to each other, and that was more than enough. It was everything. As they walked away from the station, the young woman now in tow, and being directed toward Mrs. Chen's boarding house, which still operated under new management, Helena looked up at the sky and smiled. Somewhere, the universe was weaving new connections, breaking old plans and pushing people toward the lives they were meant to live. She was grateful to have found hers. Grateful for every twist and turn, every moment of despair that led to joy, every unplanned connection that became essential. Grateful most of all for the man walking beside her, whose kindness had saved her and whose love had made her whole. The best connections, indeed, are never planned.